I guess the finance committee is still going.
We're done. I'm not sure. And Charmaine's here. Peter must have made himself a grilled cheese or something.
Somebody's throwing things in my house. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you're doing tonight's meeting from a commercial kitchen, some restaurant.
So my stepson is doing the dishes and emptying the dishwasher, and it's noisy. I'm not complaining. Well, it's 7 o'clock. We do have a quorum, but I'm going to wait another minute. Here comes Ben. There's Peter. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and
recording in progress.
Okay. I'm calling the Mansfield Town Council to order on February 14th, 2022. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We have a relatively short agenda with the one big item on it. And we have a probably fairly lengthy meeting for tomorrow night. So I'm going to ask people, please, to be as succinct as possible. I know there's some of you who have Valentine's at home who you would like to get home to. And in addition, there's going to be, hours spent tomorrow night. So let's see if we can be as brief as possible tonight. Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Osberger. Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Coleman.
Ryan's here.
I see him.
Here.
Thank you. For Tony.
Mr. Fratelli will be joining us later this evening. He's had a work conflict.
Thank you. Kotchenberger.
Here.
Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome back, Mr. Bruder. It's glad to have you here again. Next item on our agenda is opportunity for the public to address the council. Is there any member of the public present, Mr. Aylesworth?
Not aware of any members of the public looking to address the council tonight, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move to your report.
Thank you. Just a general reminder to all council members, not that anybody would possibly forget because you've been looking forward to it with great interest for some time, but we do have a special meeting tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, same virtual space as always, to talk about ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funding proposals. So I will be sending out probably no later than noon, maybe a little bit before noon. I actually think I could send it out tonight, but I want to read it one more time. Some documentation for you all to review before tomorrow night's get together. So hopefully folks will have a chance to do that during the day, and you can orient yourselves to some of what you're going to see presented, in some cases represented later in the evening. But I very much look forward to getting council feedback on the direction we're looking to go with our federal ARPA funding. I know you've heard from me on ARPA several times now, dating back to November, and I think it'll really be my first chance to get some constructive feedback from the council. So looking forward to that. Let's see. So moving along, we are in the midst of our budget development season. Charmaine and I have had meetings at this point with all department heads. A couple meetings are already, we're going to be circling back with a couple departments to have some follow-up meetings to clarify some things. But the process is playing out according to plan. And, department heads, I think there's maybe a little bit more appetite or interest on folks' part this year to look for new and innovative and perhaps better ways of doing things than a lot of people had the whatever I say, I guess, the inclination to do last year in the midst of COVID. So it's definitely giving me and others a lot to ponder and consider and digest as we complete our analysis of department operating budget and capital project requests for this year. And obviously, you all have my formal budget recommendations to look forward to at the end of next month. On the topic of funding, though, there's been an awful lot of communication and workshops, webinars, conference calls, you name it, when it comes to the bipartisan infrastructure law, otherwise known, I believe, as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. Basically, there's a mass influx of funding coming from the federal government to the states, or on its way from the federal government to the states. I think Connecticut's only received small pieces of it thus far. That's going to be used over the next several fiscal years to fund a wide range of projects, a lot of which is tailored towards infrastructure, whether it be roads and bridges, water, sewer infrastructure, but also renewable energy, broadband, and what I've seen written up as being considered community resiliency. So staff and I, we've been, doing as much research as we can based on the information available. There's a lot of information yet to be made available that ultimately will help sway our approach to things, but want the council to know that we are absolutely trying to do our due diligence to get a handle on what funding may be available and what that funding may be used to help offset the cost of, again, whether it's renewable energy, infrastructure, facilities, tech, et cetera, that we're looking to do in this town. So a lot of opportunity out there, but with opportunity creates a lot of work for staff to do some analysis, but hopefully it'll all bear fruit, and we'll certainly keep you posted along the way as competitive grant application proposals are being contemplated. The town is embarked on, every 3 years, well, it's actually our second time doing it. It's a recertification process for sustainable CT. Sustainability is not just environmental sustainability. It has social and economic and cultural dimensions, and sustainability is certainly, I believe, a hallmark of this town's value system. And so there was a kickoff meeting, so to speak, last week, organized by the Sustainability Committee. It was very well attended, representation from, a wide swath of municipal departments and municipal boards and committees. And so we brainstormed some thoughts and ideas of improvements we've already made over the last 3 years that weren't necessarily captured in our initial silver certification when we went through this program. And we've, I think, identified a number of ways we were already making major strides and improvements, including, as you all know, the fact that we're, finishing up construction of a new net zero elementary school. So we need to make sure we take a thorough inventory of all the things that we're doing on a variety of fronts. And again, not just energy and environment, but the fine work of our Human Rights Commission and other pockets of town on a whole host of issues, from welcoming initiatives to other things. So these are all things we want to make sure that we capture and give ourselves credit for as we go through the certification process. So that's all very exciting, and look forward to compiling all that information and submitting it in the next few months to keep building on our past success in that area. The town continues to work closely with TSKP Studios, our architecture firm, on the municipal facilities needs assessment study. We actually just had another meeting today. We've done walkthroughs of all of the town buildings that are within the scope of that project. And, I think a lot of exciting progress and starting to see perhaps the signs of some of TSKP's preliminary recommendations taking shape. I think certainly they've learned a lot about our municipal operation and our facility needs over the last few months, and just a lot of energy. At the staff levels, we talk about different possibilities. Obviously, many or most of these ideas would require significant investment. And so the council, will all be interested to see how you respond to various proposals as they come together. But it's really important work. And we also recognize the importance in the not too distant future, once we have a better idea of where some of these findings and proposals may be headed, bringing in the public and doing, public meetings, stakeholder engagement, and getting as best we can kind of the pulses of the community and see what the community support is for some of these ideas that we have. And so very much appreciate TSKP's work on that project to date. As a reminder for folks that will be taking part in the meeting day after tomorrow, Wednesday, February 16th at 6 p.m. I believe it'll be offered in person or virtual, but it's the initial meeting of the reapportionment committee for Region 19 school district. That meeting was originally scheduled for the end of last month. It had to be rescheduled. So that's this Wednesday, 6 p.m. And if the school, if they haven't sent out a calendar invite with the log on to the virtual meeting, I'm sure that'll be happening soon. Progress continues in the construction of the new elementary school. Although I think, there've been a number of expressions of concern. I'll just, kind of leave it at that, concern about project, timeline and the work that remains to be done. Those concerns were expressed, I think, loud and clear in our last school building committee meeting. I think Mayor Moran can attest to that. Certainly the site looks a lot different than when the project started, but, I think, from a layperson standpoint, from a community member standpoint on up to our architect's perspective, we definitely have a lot of work left to do. And we'll be getting, I think, an updated assessment from our contractor, Newfield, in the near future about where exactly the project currently rests on the critical path to completion. And we're basically 6 months out, and there's a lot of project still left in front of us, and that's a very, very important project for our school and certainly for Superintendent Kelly Lyman, who, as everybody knows, is retiring. I'm sure she wants to see that project wrapping up before her time where the town is done. So downtown partnership, would like to make sure everybody's aware that our first ever Mansfield Willie Restaurant Week is coming up February 21st through March 6th. This is a collaboration between the partnership as well as Thread City Development and Willie Next, and featuring a wide variety of restaurants with a wide variety of culinary design and inspiration and different price points as well. So something for everybody. And I believe that the public can check out the menus and plan their dining adventures at Taste 2, that's the number 2, taste2towns.com. I won't go into all the details. It's in the written report as far as the specifics of upcoming programming, but I will say check out the library programming. We have a lot of programming going on at Mansfield Public Library over the next week or so. This Friday and Saturday there are programs, and the following Saturday. So stuff for people of all ages, in particular families with kids. So please check that out. Our library staff does a great job, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of fun if you take part in some of those programs. Work continues on the middle school roof replacement project. It's kind of little slow going because it's a weather permitting activity. But I believe we're maybe about the 70% completed mark. I see Alan's here. If I'm way off on that, Alan, please chime in and throw out a different percentage. But that project, which has been a bit of a marathon, continues to move forward as well. And I'm very happy to report that we have finally, I think it was right around the first of the month, we got the green light from the State Department of Public Health, Department of Health, to go live with our RFP, our request for proposals for the acquisition of the new hybrid aerial pumper, what we call the Quint, because it has 5 functions for the fire department. And as you all will recall, the Quint is going to be, the acquisition of the Quint is being funded through a CDBG small cities grant that the town received, around $1 million. And the submission deadline for proposals is next month, March 18th. And then in closing, just point out that our DPW continues to be busy with winter treatment events. I believe we've had 15 or so treating events and 8 or 9, I think it might be 9 now, with this last weekend's snow events for the season, which puts us a little bit behind a typical winter, where I think we normally have about 17 snow events. So we have a ways to catch up to 17 if we're at 9 right now. But our treated salt budget looks good. We're about half expended what we budget for the year on treated salt, and I think our salt shed, our inventory is doing pretty well. We try to keep enough treated salt on hand for about three snow events at any given time. So we keep the inventory, keep our shed as full as possible. And I guess also related to DPW, Councillor Coleman may have some comments on this that he wants to share later. Don't want to steal his thunder, but took part in a drive about town with our DPW director, our operations manager, and our assistant town engineer, and Councillor Coleman. Councillor Coleman had expressed interest and concern in the condition of certain roads in town, and that kind of led to a broader discussion about what we fund and how we fund road improvement projects in town. And so it was a great opportunity. I appreciate DPW and John Carrington suggesting it to do a drive around town and look at a wide range of roads, but also talk about the history of some of how our treatment and our paving practices have evolved, and just document the different conditions of different roads in town. Hopefully Councillor Coleman found that informative. I think so. And I will end my report there, unless council has any questions.
Questions, Mr. Coleman?
I know you're trying to keep this meeting short, but I do have some questions for the town manager tonight. Quite a few of them. The first one is, via email, we received your report probably 3.5, 4 hours before the meeting. In the past, I believe town manager's report was included in the packet. Yes or no?
I have not seen that since I've been here, and that was not the practice as I understood it from John Carrington when he was the interim.
I do think, however, that it has sometimes arrived in our mailboxes over the weekend rather than as close to the meeting as it has recently. For some of us, it's actually impossible to read it in time when it comes in the afternoon on Monday. So it would be really helpful if we could get it earlier.
Sure. I thought I was keeping with the practice that I inherited, but if the council wants something different, I'm happy to try to accommodate that.
You have a very detailed and lengthy report. It takes longer than 4 hours for me to go through your report and actually come up with some questions. Also, it will help me with the council and council rules and procedures on, maybe getting the questions to you before the meeting so you have time to answer them.
Right. My understanding, and it might not have been a good practice, I don't know, but in the pre-COVID times, I'm recalling now that it was told that, I was told that when Matt Hart was here, he handed out the report in the meeting to the council. So I've been trying to give it a few hours, not actually give it to you like the moment I'm giving it. But if we need to do it differently, I can certainly try to do that.
And also in the report, you were saying that the DOT is not being cooperative in the unregulated crosswalks. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if I use the word uncooperative. They, at this point, are they're holding to their original position that the uncontrolled crosswalks on 275, that the traffic counts don't justify their intervention and putting in uncontrolled crosswalks. So they're basically telling us that there's a process by which those signalized crosswalks, the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, can be installed, but it would not be a DOT project, a DOT expense. We would have to pursue that locally.
I'd like to bring up a point about DOT standards and them holding up to their own standards. I'd like to go ahead and share my screen, if that'd be all right.
Mayor, you're muted.
What is the purpose of sharing your screen, please?
I'm sharing the screen because I'd like to share with the council and a town manager an existing condition that the DOT is responsible for in front of the community center.
Can you tell us about it rather than take too much time at this point? Just tell us about it. We'll try to do follow-up.
No, I'd like to share my screen. Can I share
right,
my screen, Madam Mayor?
Go ahead. Tasha or whoever is the administrator, can you allow Brian to share his screen?
He should be able to, all participants should be able to share their screen at any time.
Okay.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. This is a condition that's existing in front of the community center on 275. It is a handicap ramp in front of the community center. Right now, you're looking west on 275 towards the bus stop. ADA requirements require truncated domes and a 4x4 landing, especially at a major intersection and a crosswalk like 275. So I believe this is a DOT responsibility. Ryan, can you help me out with that?
I'm not 100% sure that it is. Typically, when it comes to crosswalks, even crosswalks by state roads, I would need to ask Mr. Carrington, who I don't believe is on right now, to weigh in on that.
Okay. Both sides of that crosswalk, I'll show you in a minute, are lacking truncated domes and a 4x4 landing for wheelchairs to navigate, rest, and turn around. You're looking north in front of the community center, and sometimes you go and you look for something else, but you're looking at, for a different situation, and you come across another one. Here I see there's an ice situation. This is the condition of the handicap ramp in front of the community center. I was trying to depict the lack of the truncated dome and the lack of the landing, but it looks to me that you got a pretty serious ice condition existing there at the moment.
Brian, what is a truncated dome?
It's usually used for visually impaired people when they get to the intersection. It's a textured mat, so somebody who's visually impaired can feel that they are at a intersection, a major intersection. This is the ramp on. Again, there's quite a bit of ice out there, but this is the ramp looking south towards Mansfield Apartments. Again, there should be a truncated dome and a 4x4 landing there. This is just viewing towards Mansfield Apartments. This is the crosswalk itself. That's the ramp on the Mansfield apartment side. When I actually navigated that crosswalk, there was people that didn't see me in the crosswalk. So I did experience some problems in the crosswalk myself today. I'm going to stop the share on the screen and ask Ryan if he can comment on any of that for me.
Happy to get with our DPW director and confirm ownership responsibility for the areas that you've identified.
Okay. I just have a feeling that the DOT is not treating us fairly in this crosswalk situation. Maybe you can use that as leverage.
I just want to point out that they have in their plans for this coming summer some real reform of crosswalks on 195 or just around the corner, which we have requested in the past, and they were scheduled for next year, but they have moved them forward into this coming summer. So DOT has been partially responsive to some of the things that we have asked for. On the other hand, they claim not to even heard of the need for an additional crosswalk between Dog Lane and the other side across 195. But anyway, Mr. Osberger?
I would say that in light of Brian's comments with regard to the truncated pebbles and with the more tragic navigation of one of the crosswalks on 275, I think DOT should be looking at some ownership on these problems.
Well, we have another meeting scheduled for them later this month. I believe it's already been scheduled. Is that true, Ryan?
Yeah, they put out a poll. I don't know if they've announced a selection of the date. I think the options for next week, but I don't think they've confirmed the date yet.
Just a little comment too. I think some of those same conditions are present on the Route 89, on the east side of Route 89, going up to Southeast School from the intersection of 195. I believe that sidewalk, I would like to know if those landings are required there, the 4x4 landing. They're not present. And Ryan, I got some more questions for you. On your comment on construction of the elementary school, has the school building committee come before the council and reported to us at any point on the progress of the school?
I believe superintendent.
Haven't done that in quite some time. However, the school superintendent has been held two public meetings to give that report.
I would like to be able to have them at the council and give the council a report and have the counselors, be able to ask questions on the progress of the school. Is that possible?
We can ask. Of course, I'm on that, as is Ryan, and both of us could give you a report. We can. I will tell you that at our last meeting last week, the construction company presented a new timeline, and they still believe that they will meet the scheduled opening date in early August. However, the real problem that they have had was that early in the fall, the shipment of certain roof beams was delayed by a couple of weeks, and they couldn't do a number of other things, and that pushed the whole schedule into the coldest winter months. And then we've had some extremely cold days, which has also contributed to delay. They're still having trouble getting some of the roofing materials for the cafeteria area. For the gymnasium area. But they feel confident that as soon as the building is closed up, they will send in all kinds of people to do. They're already beginning to do some of the classroom walls, but there's a real need for a press. So there are two things happening around that. One of them is the building committee has been really pressing the construction company to keep us informed on what they can do, and as they have been, and they are assuring us they believe they can still make the time. On the other hand, the school administrators are beginning to talk about what ifs and to figure out how to accommodate staying in the existing two schools, because of course Southeast will be gone. But they're beginning to do some planning for a temporary maneuver where Southeast students would be sent with their present teachers to other buildings.
I watched that meeting, and quite frankly, I'm concerned about meeting the deadline and the opening of the new school.
You and everybody else.
It seems like everybody else is concerned, and I think rightfully so. So it'd be a good time to get the building committee together so we can get the answers to the questions going forward.
The problem, Brian, is that things like a week of very, very cold weather that delayed doing things because the ground under the floors was frozen, right? And then they had to take days to deal with snow. So they are giving us, every time we meet, estimated dates for a whole range of activities, including the final one of opening the school, substantially completing the school. But what they have been saying to us, and you must have heard this too because you were there, is they order things. The sellers say, I will have them on site by January 15th. Then on January 14th, they call and say, we can't get them to you. So, the construction company is working as hard as possible. I think, given COVID, given the weather, it should not surprise anybody, given the supply chain issues that everybody knows about. It shouldn't really surprise anybody that there might be a delay in construction. And that what we really need to do is to count on our school administrators to have plans in effect so that if this in fact happens, that kids will not suffer from it. Mr.
Okay.
Shakin?
Can I just offer an idea that I appreciate the conversation, and I read sort of Ryan's report of that meeting. I think since this isn't on our agenda tonight, I think it would be appropriate to have a report from perhaps not the building committee, since you and Ryan could provide that report at any time, but maybe from our owners' representatives and from the construction company and from the superintendent, perhaps scheduled for a few weeks when we've passed our time of extreme winter weather, and we can get a sense of what we're done with winter setbacks and where we go from there, so that the council and those who watch our meetings, but maybe not the building committee meetings, can understand what we're looking at in terms of potential opening delays for the fall. Because I think we did talk last time the superintendent was here, the time before that, about what her contingency plans were briefly, but I know they're getting more serious about them. And so I think folks, parents, et cetera, ought to hear directly from them about what may happen, but also hear directly from the construction company about their degree of confidence in meeting the deadline.
So we'll put that on a future agenda.
I think that's a good idea. I have a lot of questions on cost overruns, change orders, and all
There
that.
have not been cost overruns. In fact, we are operating under budget.
I just said I had questions about it. I didn't say there were cost overruns. I have questions about possible cost overruns and change orders and whatnot. So Mr. Shakin's idea on future agendas is a good idea. I'd like to move on to my next question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The Public Works worked on, I believe, 31 tree removals, and we had to bring in arborist tree care to do some of that work, Brian.
Yes.
What part of the work did arborist tree care do to help the Public Works Department?
I don't know the answer to your question as far as these 31 or so trees are concerned. I know that in general there are situations where I believe because of, say, the tree height, accessing higher limbs, difficult locations to get in and out of. There are any number of physical constraints that we don't have the equipment or ability to address in-house. I don't want to sell our team short, say they don't have capacity to do an awful lot. They do. But there is a certain point at which, and John could speak to this far better than I could, but I know it's been discussed in the past that that there are certain aspects of the work that can get beyond our capability.
Okay. That's all I have for you tonight, Ryan. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Mr. Asperger? You're muted, Charlie.
I see that. Yeah. I happened to notice at the tail end of the December 13th packet, pages 359 to 364, we talked about the Helping Hands program, which I think it was a progress report. And I think it's a great idea. But I see here that we're considering expanding the program eligibility to other communities like Ashford, Chaplin, Coventry, Wellington, and Wyndham. Is that true?
That is accurate because we're having difficulty fully expending the money that was given to us. And the biggest reason for that is when we asked for $500,000, our original request included funds for rental assistance. And once we were given the funds, we were told by the state we couldn't use it for rental assistance, that we had to use it for just two of the three requested reasons, which was help with childcare costs and food assistance. So I guess just to put it bluntly, when we asked for $500,000 for this, we were thinking we'd be able to use a lot of it on rental assistance. And so that's really diminished our ability to fully allocate these funds to Mansfield residents, given the narrowed scope of what we can use it for.
I see. I understand that it's up to $225 a month they can use, and a list of foods as much as $212.50, I believe, right?
Those numbers sound familiar, but I wouldn't want to misquote it. But if those are numbers you remember seeing, those numbers sound familiar.
Okay. And in 8 months, we've gone as much as $60,400, according to the report, of the balance of the $500,000 grant, which must be expended by, what is this? What did I see? December 31st, 2022. So we've gone through only about 12% of the grant. Is that right?
Right. And that was, I think, part of the impetus for looking to expand it to other communities.
So I went around and I did some straw polling, and in particular, I went to Wrights Village, and some of the people there didn't even hear about the program. And some of them thought I was making up a story. And both Helinko's Village and Wrights Village are fairly, low-income communities, and neither one of them received any kind of a mailer. In fact, the mailer went out in September 2021, went to residents that lived in 06226 zip code area, the Foster Drive area, that area. But no one really got anything over in Wrights or Helinko's, and I would have thought that maybe that would be a first place to start.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with staff about exactly where mailings went out and what targeted outreach may have happened with either Wrights or Helinko's. I don't know, as I sit here now, Charlie, that we didn't do that. I can certainly check with staff to see this, what in fact we did do.
Well, I mean, from the people that were spoken to at Wrights, they had no such knowledge. I understand that 17 households so far received food assistance, and some are receiving both child care and food assistance, so 26 households total, which is great. However, the program was launched in April of 2021, and that's 8 months of food instead of just this 1 month that a few people from Wrights Village have signed up for that could have been receiving assistance.
Mr. Shaken?
I don't want to question anyone's memory. Maybe I'm misremembering. I remember getting something in the mail in 06250 in September. I would be curious to know if we sent where the mailing was sent. But I recall this being something that we talked about over the summer when they were planning on doing more outreach because they hadn't had a ton of interaction by the summer, and that I got several notices about the availability. So
Yeah, my recollection is that it would have dropped in all mailboxes in town. But I want to, I guess, verify that with staff.
Yeah, my reaction or reactions I've been also been told from the Wrights Village people is that many of them thought I was making it up, that this grant was available, that they didn't get any kind of information whatsoever. And I would have thought that maybe at least Wrights Village or Helenkos, or even from social services in town, they would have a list of people that they could go down and, make it for those making under 55K who are eligible, could be made eligible.
Let's get a report on how exactly that was distributed and see if anybody else has any further questions. It's an important question, but let's see if we can move on. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Mr. Bruder.
Not so much of a question. I just wanted to quickly point out that I thought it was really neat how the town clerk has gotten close to the digitalization project completion, and that will be one of the few towns in Connecticut with 100% of their land records online this year.
Thank you.
Darian pushes her folks pretty hard over there. Don't tell her I said that.
Anybody else? All right. Then let's move on to reports and comments of town council members. The first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge the contribution that our local sculptor has made with snow sculptures around town. Got us some coverage on Channel 3. And I'd like to welcome Chinese sculptor Yinghe Fan, also known as Hager, to Mansfield, and to thank him for his work at the snow sculpture in front of the library. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it was neat, really neat. Then the other thing I would like to say is that I also have been participating in some CCM meetings in which we've been hearing about the details of these various and complex grant programs. Interestingly enough, the only money that has come to the state so far is for some bridge grants. And it all depends on the appropriations bills, which are currently in Congress. So we'll see if what happens with those. And I also want to say that the school building committee has been really working very thoughtfully. We have very good representation from our owner's rep, and there's been a lot of communication between town staff, between the various parties and the building committee. So it's been a pretty impressive committee to work on, I must say. Anybody else have a report or comment? Ms. Josberger.
I just have a follow-up question, maybe to Ryan. By offering these to other towns and it's federal money, was that federal grant given just to the town of Mansfield? And we're not going to get bit in the tail, are we, from trying to offer it up to other towns, are we?
We've there's been a lot of staff-to-staff communication with the state, the folks that administer those CDBG funds. So I can assure you that to the extent we've contemplated anything that's beyond the scope of the original request, Linda and her team absolutely check with the state to make sure that would cut muster.
I would think that we would want to, of course, take care of our own in town before we looked outside our borders.
My experience with the communications with members of the community is people don't always remember what they got in the mail, particularly months ago. A lot of people don't read their mail. They think, oh, this is just another advertisement, and they toss it. Granted, we really should make sure that we're using every mechanism we can to get this information out.
Sure, Mayor, but to be told that I was kind of crazy or that they thought I was kidding around with them, that it didn't exist, that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah, well, they didn't. Yes. I agree. We need to do another piece of work on this one. Anybody else? Mr. Coleman.
Yes, just want to mention, agenda item, another, number 11, petitions and requests and communications. I would like to open for discussion, Jay DeWolf, on his letter to the town. I would like to have discussion on that when we get to that part of the agenda.
No, it's on the agenda, so when we get there, you can raise it. Okay, with that, the next item is the consent agenda. Would somebody like to move the consent agenda? Mr. Bruder?
Yes, I'd like to move. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Bruder moves the consent agenda. Mr. Shaken seconds. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Mr. Osberger?
I would like to abstain from the vote because I didn't get an opportunity to go over the financial statements.
All right. Ms. Chain, would you call the roll?
Yes, Osberger. Abstaining. Berthelot.
Yes.
Bruder.
Yes.
Coleman.
I assume that was a yes, Brian? You're muted. We can't hear you.
Abstain, please.
Abstain.
Okay.
Fertoni is not here yet. I don't see him.
No.
All right. Kotchenberger.
Yes.
Moran.
Yes.
Shurin.
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Then let's move on from there to the Parks and Rec update. Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, we've been every month or thereabouts getting an update from, or the council's been getting an update from the department about ongoing programs and services and activities. And thought it'd be a good time now that Parks and Recreation has had a couple check-ins with the Finance Committee, the Council Finance Committee, to talk about its financial condition and membership more broadly. A good chance for Parks and Rec to provide a holistic overview of what they have going on and where they're looking to go in the future. And it's also a good time to do it with Jay O'Keefe now being officially named the director, no longer the interim director of Parks and Rec. So without any further ado, Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Council. I'm happy to be here. I also want to welcome Jennifer Kaufman, who is joining me this evening. Jennifer is almost about 3/4 with Parks and Rec, doing parks, open space, and related work. And so we go through our presentation. She plays a huge role in terms of all the good work that our staff does out there, and wanted to make sure she was part of our presentation. So we will walk through. It's kind of a lengthy, presentation. Obviously, we're not going to read word for word. We'll try to stop at points and focus on some areas that perhaps need a little bit more highlight. But certainly stop and ask questions or save questions to the end. And I just want to say that I'm very thankful to be in my new position, although I've been with the town for about 27 years now. I actually started with Park and Recreation in the town of Mansell when I was in high school. So it is quite unique for me, and certainly looking forward to working through these challenging times and leading our fine staff into sort of post-COVID times. So anyhow, am I going to share? I guess I can share my screen easily enough. But I don't need to add. Okay, let me see what I got here. Everybody see that?
No.
No. Okay. I'm sorry. somehow I've lost.
We've succeeded in losing you.
I've lost not only that, I've lost my Zoom bigger window here. So,
Jen, do you have the presentation? Maybe if you can pull it up, Jay could just tell you when to advance slides. Or
I don't
go.
have it with me. I can, if you give me a minute, I can grab it, but it will take me 1 second.
Jen,
I
if
clicked-
you're logged in, you can get it out of the share drive. It's in the Common Work share drive.
Yeah, and I also can pull it up
I-
from.
just click share again. It's still not there, huh?
No,
No, and you aren't either.
And I'm not either. That's double problem here. Okay.
There we go.
See the screen now? And I'm not, I'll get myself back on the picture here. My apologies. Are you saying you can see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay.
And
All right. I thank you for that. I have done these before. Figures that I would be off to a stumble here, but here we go. Okay, so see if I can get this advancing the way I want. So our outline for this evening, again, won't stop and read through all these. I know you guys had a chance to review this before we started, but we want to walk through these different areas here. If you're not familiar, Mission to Parks and Rec is in all our brochures and many of the things that we produce in print and on our website. Basically, broadly, it's enhance the quality of life for the total community, all folks in the community, by providing a variety of leisure opportunities, health, wellness, cultural awareness, natural resources, and developing recreational needs and interests of our area residents. These three pillars, as we call them, conservation, health and wellness, and social equity. This is something that from our national organization that for Parks and Recreation that we also incorporated into Mansfield Parks and Recreation. And these are what we call three pillars of what we are looking and provide to the town. And conservation we'll speak to a little bit more specifically, as well as health and wellness and our social equity piece as we walk through the presentation tonight. But sometimes social equity folks ask, how does that fit into Parks and Recreation versus the health and wellness, which is fairly obvious in conservation. But social equity for us, large variety of different things. It's really diversity, inclusion, whether from the ability to afford to take a program, to access to facilities for all people with people with all different abilities. So whether that's a universal access trail down to Bicentennial Pond area, access into the community center, and other programs. It's really important that folks of all abilities, genders, race, and just all folks have an opportunity to participate in the programs that we have. So we try to pay attention to that both internally and externally, and also in the language that we select in our publications to make sure that folks feel very welcome. Jennifer, anything on the conservation side that you would like to add?
Well, I would just say that, we're very blessed, and I'll talk about that, to have so many resources in Mansfield. And one of the things that, one of the goals in the Plan of Conservation and Development was to just make sure that everyone was in close proximity to a park or a natural area. And I think that's one of the ways that we're looking at it. And also making sure that our programming reflects the community.
Because we don't have a chance to take you around in our vans, but I know folks are fairly familiar with some of the things we do. We're just going to flash a few photos up. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and this just gives you a reminder of some of the things that Parks and Recreation works hard to provide to the community. Pickleball has been booming for years, both indoors and outdoors. We continue to mask up during youth basketball, although we continue to be able to offer that program. Some of our fine parks here. This is an event from last year, I believe, snowshoeing. And then into the organizational chart here, again, not any big changes here, but we have been operating for a bit without an assistant director, so that's showing as vacant. As I mentioned earlier, Jennifer, I believe, is about 0.65 of a position out of Parks and Recreation, so she's heavily involved in planning and development and helping to maintain especially our trail areas and open space areas and conservation and related committees that she serves on. Also not showing here, this is mostly full-time staff, of course. I just want to take a moment to mention that Parks and Recreation is kind of a first employer for many of our youth in town. That 16 to 23-year-old age group makes up, I think last time I checked that, it was at least 50 to 60% of our staff. And so we're an employer, the town is, through Parks and Recreation, of folks' first jobs. And so we take on that role of trying to train and provide a good guidance for our young staff that provide great services to the town. And that includes, of course, our local high school students, as well as folks, our young adults in the area, whether they're at universities or in other areas of work. Our primary service areas, I won't read through all these for you. You can see those pretty clearly, but they do encompass a pretty broad area of activities. We also work very closely with our coach-sponsored organizations, which is at this point is mostly athletics, but it could be other areas and has been in the past. But right now it's a Little League program, the soccer program, and a lacrosse program. Hopefully everybody recognizes our seasonal brochures. This is one dating back to this past summer. And believe it or not, we'll be working on a spring brochure right now. I'll be out in a few weeks, and it will have a glimpse into summer programs already. Even though it's chilly out there tonight, we are thinking summer already. But this brochure encompasses, of course, all our programs and helps to promote all the fine things that we do through parks and preserves and programs and community school of the arts and so on. So it's just one area that we use in addition to a lot of social media areas. We've had our challenges like all departments with COVID. We think we've done a pretty good job of managing the many things, recommendations and guidelines that come down through the state and the local health organizations. We work very closely with Eastern Highlands, as well as our facility management team over the past couple of years, and continuing with COVID. There's the interesting thing with Parks and Rec is there's never a one size fits all or one set of protocols fits all Park and Rec programs. The pool has its own protocols, as does fitness, as does camps, as does after school programs and athletic programs. There's always something different in all our programs that we have to, although there's some things that are common across the board, there are many things that are different, and it's been a continuous effort among our staff to keep up with those things. We certainly appreciate all the guidance and the collaborative efforts with the two departments I mentioned. This one here that's copied here, this guide, it says January 2022. That's how recent we've updated this. And this gets updated probably about every couple of months. It's both online and it's also sent out to our membership. And then we send out specific guidelines to all our different program areas, depending on what they need for communication and information from us. Programming highlights. There's a lot of highlights here. We'll try to jump around. I just mentioned a few of them regarding the, this is, the last fiscal year here, or through the year of December 2021. I just want to mention too, I think, in addition to all the protocols that our staff, other than the three months that we were shut down indoors, we continue to do a lot of outdoor programming, whether that be maintaining, the parks and trails and playgrounds. But basically, the community center reopened in June, 2020, right? 2020, if I have my dates right. They continue to be hands-on, serving the public safely and following protocols, but they were actively 7 days a week, and as they continue to do that now. We also provided space for indoor vaccination clinics when some of our rooms could not be used for traditional things. I would like to just show you a couple slides here and just some of the struggles we've had in terms of not surprising, but a comparison. So the last full fiscal year we had was 18-19. And in comparison to this past fiscal year where we're just beginning to emerge, want to give you, where we had the first year of COVID, I wanted to kind of show you a comparison. I think a couple of big things that stand out, obviously the cancellation of programs, right? So never knowing what 6 months is going to look like, we would continue to roll out traditional programs, add more virtual programs, hybrid programs. But even with that, we continue to have a lot of cancellations. It's just as much work to offer those programs and to cancel and communicate those programs sometimes as it is to run those programs. And obviously a big revenue difference between those, a normal year of 18-19 and a full COVID year, as we call it, where we had a significant drop off in revenues. Another comparative here is with the participants, showing the last full fiscal year, 18-19, we're way up here on the graph, about 2,600 summer participants, and there are 2,700 in the fall. You can see that as you move through the seasons, and then the green columns there indicate the COVID year, the first COVID year that we had. And so you can see it kicked off, and it's about our first season really after we kind of reopened was the summer, and it was still very, very little participation. And we increased a little bit in the fall, and of course, coming back indoors, we saw a drop off in combination with, COVID continuing to be a spread and challenge, but also with some of the protocols that were necessary, but also such as mask wearing is a very common one. And also where people were, still not comfortable coming back indoors. And also with our programs, we have to spread out people in many of our programs indoors. And so that limited the number of people we could put into classroom space or program activity areas. This is a 3-year comparison with just quarter 1 with participants. Again, the blue is a normal full, year, 2019, what you would see participation. This 3-year shows you program fees. The 375 is a typical year we would see in quarter 1 for revenues, just through program fees. And then the big drop off in 2021, and here we are in 2020. Drop off in 2020, and here we are in 2021. This past, first quarter, where we're starting to make a comeback before heading indoors again, so to speak, into the next quarter. So that's just a couple slides in terms of some comparisons. I thought it was important to highlight and show. And I wanted Jennifer to kind of jump in at this point, unless there's any questions before we do that, is have Jennifer walk through the open space, parks and ag culture areas. So I guess I just want to pause a moment and see if there's any questions. We will be tackling community center, Leonard Hall, and some other financials coming up later in the presentation. Okay. Jan, you want me to advance for you, or do you have?
Yeah, I'll let you know when to advance. Thanks.
Wait,
If
just
there's
a
no
second.
question.
We have a question from Mr. Coleman.
Sure.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for the presentation and congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
The community center falls under your responsibility, correct?
Correct. And we will be getting, but go ahead. Yeah, we'll be getting to that a little bit more detail later on, but
Would
sure,
you like
Brian,
me
go
to
ahead.
ask a question after you get into that detail? It probably might be better.
Hold on for a question on that, Mr. Coleman. Let's get the full. If you have questions on the presentation as it's been made, then that would be appropriate.
I agree with you, Mayor. I'll wait until he presents on the community center. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So I guess I'll continue. Most of you know me. I'm Jennifer Kaufman, and I work both for Parks and Recreation and the Planning and Development Department, as Jay said. And I'm for Parks and Recreation for many years. I've been involved with open space, the open space parks and agricultural land. I had to include a picture of the Mansfield Tomorrow Plan of Conservation Development because that sort of spans both my roles. And as you are all very well aware, parks, open space, agricultural lands are near and dear to our residents, as we learned from the community outreach we did through our plan, and as we hear very often. So if you want to advance to the next slide, Jay, that would be great. So a little bit about our parks, preserves, and natural areas. We have 19 owned parks and preserves, 36 miles of trails, 2,200 acres of parks, preserves, and natural areas, 600 acres in conservation easement, a community garden, accessible trails, canoe, kayak launches. We have several greenways in town, state designated greenways, including a national, the Willimantic River, which is a state designated greenway, and also a national water trail. I see a question from Peter.
Oh, thanks. And does this include the playing fields, baseball, soccer?
Yes.
Thank you.
So in my role with Parks and Recreation, and there are two advisory committees that I staff. The first is the Parks and Natural Resources Committee. It used to be there. This committee used to be two committees. It was the Parks Advisory Committee and then the Open Space Preservation Committee. And then a few years ago, we decided to combine those two, or you decided to combine those two committees. And so now it is one. And this committee really focuses on preservation and stewardship of our parks and natural resources. And they make recommendations to the town council. So they'll look at things from acquisitions. They advise the Planning and Zoning Commission whenever there's a development that involves kind of any recreational amenities or open space dedications. They'll serve, that committee is very involved with other conservation groups such as Connecticut Forest and Park Association that manages the Nipmuc Trail, Joshua's Trust. They do a lot of education and outreach. So every season, we try to run at least 3 or 4 programs in the Parks and Recreation that are advertised in the Parks and Recreation brochure. And these are done for free by these volunteers. So coming up, we have a snowshoeing event. We have a winter tree ID, and then we'll have, everything from a migrant bird walk, that type of thing. So they do a lot of education and outreach. They also reach out to landowners. For example, there was recently a grant that was being promoted by the Last Green Valley, the National Heritage Corridor that Mansfield is a part of. And so they did a mailing to all large forested landowners, sort of encouraging them to get some technical assistance on their forests. And so things like that. So over the years, they've done a lot of outreach. They do a lot of our trail planning. I don't know how many of you have been to Simpson Wood Preserve. That's our newest park. Parks and Natural Resources, the Parks and Natural Resources Committee, they walked that 114 acres. I can't tell you how many times, and they mapped out all those trails. So, and then finally, this committee provided a lot of input to the Plan of Conservation and Development. So next slide, thank you. So in terms of planning, acquisition, management, and outreach, the Plan of Conservation and Development outlines, what is appropriate for acquisition. An appendix in the POCD contains open space acquisition criteria. So anytime a landowner would approach the town, it goes through that set of criteria. And then we haven't had an acquisition in a couple of years, but of course, it would be reviewed by the different advisory committees and then go and if it's an acquisition project, it's handled in executive session, and then it goes to the town council and then a public hearing. And usually when we purchase, we leverage things with grants. We've had a lot of success with the Connecticut Deep Open Space and Watershed Acquisition Grant. We also get open space dedications through a regulatory action of PZC. So when there's a subdivision or another development, that also, the Parks and Natural Resources Committee looks at that. We have management plans developed for most of our properties, not all. We want to get to all of them. They do take a little bit of time to get developed. And we are involved with monitoring, maintaining, improving. Public Works does they do a lot of that work, but we also work with volunteers, outside contractors, and some of this is grant funded. For example, the Universal Access Trail over at Bicentennial Pond, that was a grant funded project. That was a large trail development project, as well as the wheelchair accessible canoe kayak launch at River Park. But so many of the larger park amenities are funded through grants. So we do a lot of outreach and through Walktober, outreach to landowners and through land management programs. So you can switch, Jay. Thank you. So we are also collaborating with many entities in town. You can see this map. I'm not sure how big it comes up on your screen, but everything, the yellow, all of those different colors are public and protected open space. The yellow is Yukon land. The orange is Mansfield Hollow State Park and Army Corps of Engineer land. The green is town land. Pink and purple are Joshua's Trust. And then that large swath of brown is the agricultural easement that is in the Stearns Road, Browns Road, Pleasant Valley area. Mainly that is land that is owned but restricted for agricultural purposes that is owned by Mountain Dairy. So we're constantly working with these various organizations, Connecticut Forest and Park Association. As I mentioned, they manage the Nipmuc Trail, which begins in Mansfield and then goes all the way up to Union, to the Massachusetts border. We work a lot with USDA, Natural Resources Conservation Service, on management. They assist us with with invasives and other things. We work with the Last Green Valley on grants. They funded a portion of the signage for Simpson Wood Preserve, and also some of the bridges. They funded the materials for the bridges in there, which were built by Eagle Scouts. And then, of course, we work with DEEP for Mansfield Hollow State Park grants and both for development and acquisition, and then Yukon. So it's a big system of trails and open space in Mansfield. Mansfield is definitely not working in isolation. Charlie?
I was wondering if I could get a link to that map there, that data. It seems very interesting.
Yes, I can. What would
it's in our packets? It's in our.
I know,
packets.
but it's hard. Yeah, in our packets though, our packets are kind of like black and white. Oh, the link is to the is in the packets.
If you go to your agenda, if you go to the agenda online, this map is in, and I just expanded it on my screen so I could look at it better.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was my question, because it's kind of difficult to see it in such a small piece, but if I could access it another way, it would be great. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's in our packets. Thank you.
I will also put a link in the chat when I'm done with this, and I can just cut and paste it from my computer, of the parks website, which has this information. And I'm always happy to answer questions, so you can email me directly and I can give you as much information about the parks in Mansfield as you desire.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
We also, I staff the agriculture committee. We've had an agriculture committee since the mid 1990s. And their role is, obviously they're advisory to the town council, but they're promoting agricultural viability in Mansfield. Their goal is to keep farmland in farming. That's sort of something, that's an old trope that they keep repeating over and over again, but really that's what they're there to do. They educate about the business of farming. You know, on occasion we have issues with smell, with, odor or slow moving tractors. People get a little frustrated, but that's really, the agriculture committee tries to kind of put forth the message that farming in Mansfield is a business. And along with the beautiful views and the fresh produce, you have to sometimes put up with some of those other things. We do have 9 town-owned agricultural fields, a total of 75 acres that are leased to local farmers. These leases, many of you, if you're new on the council, you may not have seen them. We started the lease, we've been leasing these properties for many years. In 2014, we did a request for proposals to local area farmers, and so anyone could bid on this land and lease them from the town. And the leases are for 5 years with the opportunity to renew for another 5 years, because the idea was that if you're farming this land, you're investing resources, you're maintaining this field, so you do need to have this land for a little bit longer. And these farmers, they're not paying the town for this land, but they are maintaining it. So when you drive by Mount Hope Field, for example, they're collecting a little bit of hay from there, but it means that our public works department doesn't have to clear the trees or mow that. And so it kind of benefits the town and it benefits the farmer. They're challenging properties because they don't have a lot of infrastructure. There's no water, there's no place to store your equipment. So, but it is important in the plan of conservation development to keep our prime agricultural soils in farming. Agriculture Committee reviews regulations related to farming. They participate and advise you as the town council on the acquisition of agricultural land, and they encourage grow your own. We have the Mansfield Community Garden, which I alluded to earlier. We also have this Mansfield Grown brochure that we publish biannually. We're going to be publishing a new one this year. And then the Agriculture Committee is very involved with the Taste of Mansfield initiative, which is a program it's a partnership program with economic development, the library, the schools, the senior center, human services, and the human services role right now is doing the Farms to Families program, which you may be aware of. Yes, Charlie?
Brian, you had your hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can only see a few of you on my screen. So
Go ahead, Charlie.
No, just a very brief comment. This stuff is just absolutely wonderful, and this is the kind of things that makes Mansfield fantastic. I love the reciprocity of how we're going about doing it. This is just excellent. It really is.
Thank you.
I think it's a great program. But I have one question, because when I was on the road tour with the Department of Public Works, I made the comment, especially over there on Bass's Bridge Road with the drifting snow. And I made the suggestion maybe use snow fence again. But they said that snow fence can get caught in the farm. The wiring after the snow fence breaks down can get caught in the farm equipment. is there landscaping that could be done or natural plants that could stop the snow and without really taking on much tillable soil?
That's definitely something we could look into. I can definitely chat with Brian and John and Derek, who I assume were in the car with you, and find out what all that entails, and we could definitely chat about that.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that might be my last slide. Yeah. But do you have any questions regarding any of this before Jay goes into the Community School of the Arts?
Anybody else? I just want to also comment that this is the part of the recreation department that was most heavily used during the early months of COVID.
Yes.
And I heard from a number of people who said, thank God we've got these trails, these outdoor activities, because it gave us some way of entertaining the kids and getting out of the house and being together. So it clearly is one of the really important parts of the contribution that Mansfield makes to the community. Mr. Shakin.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, I think this is part of our discussion later to some extent, but what you just said, Mayor, is one of the reasons that I've started thinking about our Parks and Recreation Department a little differently than the council has thought about them for the last several decades. And just really, this pandemic really highlighted how essential the services are, especially the outdoor recreation services, obviously during the earlier days of the pandemic, but really everything that we do as a public service rather than as a sort of membership association or otherwise. And so it's also one of our big selling points, I think, for Mansfield as a community is a place with these kind of opportunities in abundance, without being, in the remoteness of a national park. So thanks for including this in the presentation. It's really helpful.
Okay.
Well, of course, we couldn't agree with you more. And, we worked hard as a staff too to try to promote these things to the public. And many people were already very aware of them, but many folks weren't as aware of how extensive it was. So it was unfortunate times, but a great time to showcase those facilities and engage more people. So the Community School of the Arts, CSA, is another key component of our services with Parks and Recreation. I want to highlight this a little bit because of the recent donation by John and Jean Leonard to renovate the old schoolhouse facility. The quick history on this is that this program transitioned from the University of Connecticut back in 2016 when they were looking to, get away from that community piece of the arts. Our department, Kurt Masseni and myself met with the Dean of Fine Arts and had some discussions, and we brought information back to the council. And the quick version of that is we went into kind of a trial situation for a couple of years, running programs out of E.O. Smith High School and the community school, community center. And a lot of challenges with that, but we were still fairly successful. Leonard Hall opened in 2019 with a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, and unfortunately, it was one of those areas that was hit hard in terms of what we could do programming wise. Once COVID shut things down in March, and even after we reopened. So we are doing some limited programming down there. We continue to work hard and be creative in how we can do both in-person and virtual classes, art and music and theater and dance. And we are gearing up for another marketing campaign with the Community School of the Arts to re-engage not just the Mansfield community, but of course the regional community in this service area. The community school, the community center is certainly a major part of what Parks and Recreation does. It's actually 18 years old this year. From the very start, the town and council wanted to make sure that, the community center was not just a fitness center, that we had other components in the facility, and that while we are needed to rely primarily on user supported fees, that a membership was not required to take classes, participate in really anything that is offered at the center in terms of programs and special events. And you can even, get pay a daily fee to gain access to the center if the membership is not something that you are interested in doing. But we also have annual, 3 month and 1 month. At this time, those are the membership options that we have. We're going to be interrupted here a moment. Excuse me 1 second. I am at the community center this evening, and although I had my volume turned down on my phone, was unable to silence it for that announcement. So we're wrapping up here for this evening at the center. Community center membership. So this is where we were as of the 1st of January, 2022. You can see memberships, which could be one person. It could be a family of 8, just for example. So the membership and then members are 2 different numbers that represent the makeup of where we are right now. This is a pretty typical 53% residents and slightly under non-residents is about right for both the community center, as well as our classes tend to be a little bit more resident versus non-resident in terms of that breakdown. Some information on membership types. I mentioned the family, individuals, insurance-based individuals we'll talk about here in a moment. On the bottom bullet here talks about a Silver Sneaker membership that we will speak to in a moment with insurance-based memberships. This, I know this is probably difficult to make out and maybe even difficult to make out in your packet, but we wanted to show you at least, what visits typically look like pre-COVID in a typical year. Okay, so January, you're seeing January right up until March, halfway through March, when the center, as well as all the facility, fitness type facilities and rec facilities, community centers shut down for several months per state protocols. And then we reopened here June of 2020 and showing us a graduated growth back towards normal here. So our daily admissions have been pretty strong recently. Maybe folks aren't willing to buy a membership over the last year or so, given what the challenges were, but participation in daily membership since we reopened have gotten pretty strong, and certainly in recent months here, as we've gotten back indoors during the cold months, we see a big, we're ahead of what our goal was, our pace, what is for this fiscal year in terms of daily membership, daily paying people. This is just another way of showing the dramatic drop off when COVID. This is pre-COVID. When we get January, February, we always see a pickup in terms of memberships, and then the drop off tells a story. Unfortunately, during COVID, and even as some restrictions were lessened, we continued to see some challenges there and getting back to where we need to be. One thing I'll point out is we had a pretty decent summer for what we typically see at the community center. Community center participation or membership types in the summer typically are not as strong as other times of year, but we did see when COVID was cases were improving, the mask mandate was removed. Folks felt more comfortable coming indoors to participate. We saw a little bump in activities, which was surprising for the summer months. And then again, unfortunately, as COVID variants returned and indoor, cold weather forced people back inside, we saw another drop. But we're hopeful that will shortly turn around. This is a comparison slide for you. I won't walk you through every bullet. Certainly we're happy to answer questions about these, but there's a lot of information But I just again want to show a side-by-side comparisons as we're moving through this. I would anticipate that to be one question is where were we before and where are we now? More recently through December. I just want to remind folks that the community center, aside from being, classes and fitness and health, memberships and daily users, we are hosts to a variety of different special events and community use, ranging from, Halloween events to teen center, supervised teen center use. E.L. Smith Swim Team swims here. We also, host many town meetings and functions such as, the annual votes that we have here in town. We have some information there about some sustainability progress that we've recently completed, as well as other ways that we are working hard to sustain sustainability in different areas at the community center. So insurance supported memberships, more commonly referred to as Silver Sneakers, although Silver Sneakers is not the only membership that is supported by, if you have a insurance that supports a membership to a fitness center, rec center, community center.
Attention, the time is now 8:30 p.m. and the community center is now closed.
Just
thank you for coming. Have a good night.
Pausing as there's an announcement in my ear. So Renew Active is another significant membership type. So what happens with these, if you're not familiar, is if you have a insurance program that provides free access, and we participate, is a choice that the town has, but we have chosen to accept Silver Sneakers, Renew Active membership types. You have free access to the center, and the town receives reimbursement by a amount of swipes that someone comes into the center. But there is a cap on the amount of swipes that we receive reimbursement for. That's a quick kind of version of that. So we currently about 55% of our current membership is made up of one of these types of insurance supported memberships, whether that be Silver Sneakers or Renew Active. It's a great benefit to folks that have it. It keeps our seniors healthy. This is a benefit that primarily supports our seniors. It's primarily for, kicks in when folks are retirement age 65 and older. And that's the tremendous thing about it. It engages those folks, keeps our seniors healthy, connects them to the community. But we do have some challenges in terms of what we see for reimbursement rates and the compatibility with our recreation fund philosophy and current date, how we are functioning now in terms of being primarily a self-supporting, not just community center, but a parks and recreation fund overall. Strategies for Sustainability, a recreation program fund. These are things that we've been actively discussing at the finance committee level and among staff. There's a lot of bullets here, but I just maybe highlight a couple things. We're looking to continue evaluating as I mentioned earlier, the compatibility of accepting supported membership types through insurance companies with the expectation of recovering our expenses, so our self-recovery fund with the recreation program fund. We continually try to negotiate with the third-party providers of these insurance programs, although we haven't gained too much traction, especially during COVID. It's been very difficult to increase any kind of reimbursement rate. Some other thoughts with sustainability to the recreation program fund is to look to reestablish, is to potentially engage a financial consultant specializing in analysis of the recreation funding. So there are different models, but they would look at different models and operational costs to develop a financial sustainability plan going forward. Increasing in capital and developing capital fund campaigns to fund equipment and other upgrades to attract all ages and interest. expanding partnerships, cross-marketing with town, nonprofit agencies, and businesses, increasing the frequency of sponsoring, high-profile local, national charitable events, to look to expand our regional awareness of both MCC, Leonard Hall, reestablish the Friends of Mansfield Parks and Rec, cultivate relationships with potential major benefactors and donors, which might expand existing scholarship and special contribution funds, establishing a legacy fund, underwriting costs associated with capital projects. So that's a lot said, but I do, in terms of wrap up here, just want to, if we're not familiar, remind folks. I know that we're engaged in the budgeting process, and so this is something that I'm sure folks are aware. But just as a reminder, our Parks and Recreation Program Fund is made up of 80% program fees, rentals, and donations of other sales, going towards our cost recovery model. And about 20% is kicked in by the town general fund, or $615,000 in this current fiscal year. We get about another 125 and general fund contributions for both capital improvement projects, and about $30,000 to maintain all those wonderful parks and trails and athletic fields that are out there, in terms of what is in the budget currently, through Parks and Recreation, through our capital improvements program. Jennifer talked about the Open Space Preservation Fund. Typically, the town has gone out for referendums to build up those funds or to acquire more funds, and that's typically how we've leveraged additional grant funding. And this finally, the challenges, some of them very obvious, but providing services during COVID-19, sustainability of our resources, our financial plans and goals, and continuously looking to make sure we're meeting the needs of all population groups in town. Opportunities here, as you, several council folks had pointed out during the presentation, is we were a solution for many opportunities for folks for recreation, to relieve pressure, to get people together as families, to get out and be active, and indoors too, through a lot of hard work. So we feel that we provide solutions during these difficult times. We have for a number of years been looking to develop a Parks and Recreation master plan. We feel like something along the master plan lines would be important to helping to, emphasize and plan for our parks, and not just today, but into the future, how we should go about prioritizing these areas, what should be developed, what things need to get maintained, and what kind of resources would be, involved in doing that. We feel that's an important piece of us moving forward. And then we have the other things here too that I think that are important as well, but just are there in front of you in terms of promoting the parks, being key resources, and reasons why people may want to move to Mansfield, stay in Mansfield. The Community School for the Arts is a big area of growth and revenue for us, we believe, once that gets some traction going. And again, continuing to improve the accessibility to all folks, as I mentioned. So that is, I think, brings us to the end of the presentation. Certainly very happy, Jennifer and I, to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Shakin.
Thanks. I don't have a question right now. If Peter doesn't mind, I just wanted to sort of dovetail onto this with a quick sort of just tell folks on the council what we've been talking about in the finance committee with Jay and crew for the last probably 6 months or so. Basically, the council, you'll recall, asked us to look at the Silver Sneakers program specifically, and sort of more broadly the sustainability sort of issues around the Parks and Recreation Fund. And we've been talking about this for a couple of years. I think we started the conversation in the budget that that came about at the beginning of the pandemic, when it sort of came to be pretty clear that we were subsidizing the Silver Sneakers program from the town's general fund. And so the report is this, what you just got from Jay, which is basically, you know, that the community center is still very clearly very much within the throes of the effects of COVID-19. And every time we think we're going to come out the other end and people are going to be very comfortable working out indoors amongst each other and therefore purchasing memberships, we get hit with another wave. And people are no longer comfortable with that. And so they don't come to the community center. And so it's basically our recommendation is sort of informal at this point, which is that we really need to give society and the Parks Department time to come back to some semblance of normal at the community center before we feel like it's a good idea to make drastic programming changes. But also that if, you know, all of the things being equal, if things continue the way that they were pre-COVID, that it's clear that the Silver Sneakers program specifically, which is sort of came to being in a significant way when the state employee retirement system switched to an insurance, a Medicare supplementary insurance provider that offers that program. It's just not financially sustainable for us. There was hope, I think, at the time that it would dramatically expand our usership, which would have a revenue benefit, even though we are receiving a lower amount of money per user and per visit than we would with a membership. But absent changes to the structure of that program, it seems like it would be difficult to sustain. However, the Parks and Rec Department have put in place a number of mitigation methods and tactics that they're hoping will help solve some of that and bring more Silver Sneakers patrons in more frequently. But it's just impossible to evaluate whether those things are working or not. That would help substantially with the financial sustainability of the program. But it's impossible to tell if they're working or not, because people, especially people who are of retirement age, who are therefore most vulnerable from a health perspective for COVID, have really not been feeling comfortable at a population level returning to the community center. So it's a long way of saying our recommendation is to kind of wait and see on that program, and also, on the community center's financial model more broadly, because it's, as you saw from those charts sort of halfway through Jay's presentation, it's really clear that COVID is the primary culprit for the lower usership at the community center, and that we ought to expect, from my perspective at least, to have to continue to subsidize that program for a little while longer until we get to a point where people are completely back to normal levels of comfort, which is going to take some time, even if we have now entered this sort of endemic phase of the pandemic where we are, as a society, sort of dropping the non-pharmaceutical interventions. It's going to take people time to get used to that normalcy again and come back to the community center. So that's my quick report out from finance. I have other thoughts about Parks and Recs generally, but I thought it might be helpful to tell the council what we have talked about with Jay and what I think we've decided as a committee.
I think actually the Silver Sneakers issue was surfacing in the year before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, it just really blew everything apart. There's also another problem. There's several other problems with competing programs. For example, the senior center runs some things which directly compete with the community center. Plus, there are the private gyms in places like the mall, Eastbrook Mall, and and other places around Wyndham. There's the student recreation building at UConn that opened that is available to faculty and staff as well, that may have been pulling some people out of our community center. And in addition, there's the potential for a new community center in Wyndham, which may pull some of our non-resident members away from us. We do have a substantial percentage of non-resident members. And the other thing that I think is important is that among the users of the community center, a very high percentage of them are of retirement age, fall into the senior population, present company included. So this is obviously going to be an ongoing project to think about Parks and Rec, but as a whole, as well as to think about the funding for the community center itself. Are there any other questions of Jay and Jennifer? Mr. Coleman.
Hello, Jay. You're inheriting a lot of challenges, so it looks as though your expertise is going to be tested in the near future quite quickly. The question I have is, what is the membership number of the community center fully subscribed?
Historically, that number has been around 22 to 2,300 memberships, and then that usually transfers into about 45 to 4,800 members.
And so you're saying that's fully subscribed? You can't take more members than that, or?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was kind of just reflecting back to
I'm looking at the numbers and what we could.
So we've been over 5,000 before. There's been times we've been over 5,000 and it's still kind of managed in terms of compaction issues weren't really significant. It depends a little bit on the makeup of the membership types, quite honestly. So I referenced that 5,000 number, but what we learned from that a few times when we're over 5,000 is roughly around 500 of those folks were on the books as being Silver Sneaker members, but weren't really active. And so what we've done in the past several months here is kind of purged or canceled out Silver Sneaker members who hadn't been active. We used a 2-year because of COVID. We were very liberal in terms of how over the last times they were really swiped into the facility on a regular basis. So we can get a more accurate reading as our true membership. But so that's why I use a number of like 4,700, 4,800 members. And we typically can, that doesn't really impact us compaction wise during most times of the day. It could in the pool, but maybe not upstairs in fitness or the other way around, depending on time of the day.
The mayor mentioned, local gyms and other community centers, and how is our pricing competitively with other gyms and community centers?
Well, it's a great question. I will say that if we think of our nearest comparison really is a YMCA, because of the classes, the pools, and who they're looking to attract to the facility with families, and the range of ages from basically young children to seniors. So if you compare us to the YMCA's, we're usually a little bit cheaper in terms of like what's happening in the Ellington Y and the Y up in Putnam for membership options. If you compare us to a local fitness or gym only that has cardio and strength equipment and perhaps a few classes, we are a little bit higher, but it's not an apples to apples comparisons with those facilities. Without a gym or a swimming pool or areas, they don't have a teen center, for example, that teens that is valuable to Mansfield, but in a typical gym, they would not have a free space like that where they could be generating revenue out of, or a sitting room.
Back to that fully subscribed membership thing. Is there room to increase membership and become more competitive in pricing?
Well, in terms of increasing, bringing more people in, certainly we need more people right now. In terms of being more competitive in pricing, again, I reference our really our closest comparisons being the YMCA's. That said, we know that the local gyms around here are people, make choices, buying choices between those local gyms and us, right? So to answer your question, yes, we need to relook, I think, at all those options and see if a different pricing strategy would be more beneficial, or whether we stay the course, or whether we, do different tiers with memberships. Do we include classes with memberships? I think really we're open to looking at everything, and so yeah.
Very good. I see, the COVID-19 has hurt a lot of businesses, and it's obviously hurt the community center quite badly. There's going to have to be some sort of recovery. It takes time to recover from something like this. Do you have any ideas on marketing and promotion?
Yeah, I mean, since we've opened from the start, we've always had a marketing plan that we adjust on an annual basis. And that really, it wasn't any different in the last couple of years during COVID, although the focus got more on reminding people that we're here, but also the protocols that we had in place to help keep them safe in terms of cleaning and our good air filtration systems and such. And then now we're just stepping up some more initiatives with marketing. We just had an open house recently. We offered some specials that to try to re-engage people. They would, we had a 1 month for $30, for example. Try it for 1 month for $30 for the whole family. And then we're just rolling out now some an offer to try to not just have them for those 30 days, but to have them longer than that. So to answer your question about promotions and marketing, yes, we were also very careful though during COVID not to spend money foolishly by doing our typical pace of advertising in terms of radio and newspapers that were very expensive, because we knew that a large segment of the population, didn't matter how much you advertised to them, they weren't going to come in. So we tried to be very creative in terms of how we advertised and watched our finances with that. So, you will see a continuation of a step up in promotions and marketing with the center, and a little bit more finances put towards that as we begin the time to pull out of, people coming back. So
that makes sense. Now, did I understand you correctly when you said the mask mandate hurt membership?
Yeah, we took a little bump for that. It was clear, and we heard that from people, but then we kind of rode that wave a little bit. It did dip down because we saw an increase in the summer that we typically don't see. And then it came down several weeks after that mask mandate came in. And that's kind of a normal thing. People don't want to play basketball or work out on a treadmill or something with a mask on, At the same time, it also reassured a lot of people that, felt we should have those things in place. So there's pros and cons to that. But to answer your question, yes, we did see a little bit of a drop off, but we saw more of people coming in and willing to pay a daily fee, which definitely we saw a big increase from the normal situation. So people kind of putting their toe in the water versus committing to a full membership on an annual or 3-month basis. So these mandates and protocols are important to the safety of our community, but in doing that, just like a restaurant business, perhaps, or other type of businesses, there's pros and cons to it,
Thank you. I hope we'll be in a position to end our mask mandate so we can increase business over there for you at the community center. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, Peter, Mr. Katzenberger.
Oh, thanks. No, and thank you, Jay. I also think earlier you talked about studying, looking at the Silver Sneakers program in more detail, as well as possibly hiring a consultant. I think those are both, all of that has to do with, planning for the post-COVID era. So I wanted to emphasize that. I also think, there's a couple of things, as you mentioned, we don't know, such as what will be the impact of the new community center in Wyndham. But also, I don't think we have a sense of how the new student center has impacted anything, because I believe it opened in fall 2020 during COVID, and it's been closed on and off since then, although more open lately. And in terms of faculty and staff using it, or other people using it instead of the community center, that I think would probably be the last thing we would see, and more likely that if it occurs, I would think would occur when things are fully back to normal at the university. So I think I appreciate those uncertainties. I think it's important to, and I don't know how much it's been done, but I'm also going to assume that the problems we've had with Silver Sneakers that you've very well outlined is not unique to us, and as we've talked about in various finance committee meetings, an issue for a good number of communities, both probably in Connecticut, around the United States. And so that's whether it's a particular potential ally in terms of other groups or working with CCM or groups like that or not, I don't know, but I think it's something important to look at. Look for allies in from town community centers that are trying to meet these needs, do so affordably, recognize Silver Sneakers, but also have to make a budget. So I know you're working on that now, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure.
Further questions? Jay, do you want to add something?
No, I was just going to echo, I guess, Peter's thoughts on, the financial consultant, I think is a key to moving forward. Not that, we haven't done our own marketing and planning in the past, but this is a great opportunity, I think, to potentially bring in someone who specializes in that area to make sure that we have a very comprehensive and detailed plan going forward. And so I just wanted to echo that, and also the university facility, although much necessary for UConn and probably well overdue. It is something that is going to impact us minimally, at least. Hopefully not beyond that, but we do have to keep an eye on that. Yeah.
Mr. Shakin, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, this is just a sort of reiteration, a little bit, and an expansion of the comment I made when Jen was presenting. And because I want to sort of beat this drum a little on the council, I think the facility is almost 20 years old. And, I think as a town, during its construction and immediate period after its opening, we're really focused on making sure that the community center was like a financially self-sustaining business. And I think the Parks and Rec department has done a really outstanding job at doing that, and on really, operating a part of government as a successful business, which is something you rarely see, right? But I just want to accentuate again, one of the things that I have taken away from COVID is just how essential the community services that the Parks and Rec department overall offers. And I want to challenge us as a council and as staff, as you're developing plans and budgets, and us as we're thinking about how we allocate resources and set policy, that we think about everything that the Parks and Recreation department does, including aspects of the community center that have been historically behind a sort of membership paywall, as community resources first, and as sort of a membership business second, and we think about how we offer programming and how we allocate resources accordingly, because I think the network of outdoor recreation that we have here, in addition to being an essential service, is a huge asset for this community, and it's something that we should be marketing and are marketing as a huge reason to come here and be part of the community. And I think the fact that we are a small town with a community pool, that we have a gym that you can go play pick up basketball 3 nights a week if you want, et cetera, it just really sets us apart from a lot of other places. And so I just want to challenge us all to think about that in the future. I think it warrants some sort of reevaluation of our philosophy, if you will, at how we think about a lot of these programs. And I'll admit to being the first one, when we were talking about building CSA, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, being super concerned about it making a profit every year, when in fact the arts programming that we offer in that facility should, I'm now thinking about it in a totally different light. So as we go into budget season, I'm very supportive of this consultant to sort of take the first step in that, but I'll beat this drum whenever it comes up that I want to, change a little bit of our thinking as a community about these resources. So thanks for the soapbox. I'll shut up now. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, first Mr. Kotchenberger and then Mr. Coleman.
Thanks. I actually have a specific question. I'm not associated with the community center, but what are your views on the availability of tennis courts? And I don't mean if, you may have to think about this, but once the middle school courts were taken down a number of years ago, I believe that leaves one court in the entire town that the town owns, and that's Sunny Acres, which is effectively, really, frankly, none. The Region 19, those are fine courts, but understandably, they have limitations with Region 19's needs, and frankly, a somewhat eccentric schedule on when they decide to lock the gates and when they don't. But those courts are not routinely, and presumably never will be, available to Mansfield residents, which means one court that's not really particularly accessible or playable. So what do you think about that in terms of demand or need?
I think the demand is there, not just for tennis, but also the emerging game of pickleball. So, for example, the one court that you referenced after the middle school courts were shut down and then torn up, we have at Sunny Acres Park, and that one tennis court is actually 4 pickleball courts, and there is a competing kind of use with that court. And that I hear from folks that are looking to get standalone pickleball courts. I also hear from tennis folks saying, we really missed the middle school courts. As you just referenced, the only other courts the town has besides the one share court is the high school, when the high school is not using those courts. And so I think that kind of ties back to, not that we can't make decisions without a master plan, but I think my feeling is that we could use some more pickleball and tennis courts, maybe even some outdoor basketball courts. But a good master plan would go a long ways too, in making sure we're not just reacting totally on instinct, but also on what the population and community feels like they have some input to that process and what the needs are. So,
thank you,
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, I just want to remind Councilor Shaken, some decades ago when this went to referendum, it was sold to the taxpayer as a money-making opportunity, at best, and at worst, break even. And I'm asking Jay to work his hardest to meet that objective, since that's how the whole project was sold to us to begin with. Thank you.
I want to ask a totally unrelated question. One of the issues that we've talked about recreation in the past is a dog park. Have you given any thought to the dog park?
Dog park has not been forgotten. I know that there's strong interest in the dog park as well. And we had looked at one point, Jennifer probably remembers this, when Kurt Mazzeni was still working as director. We had looked at some land by the middle school, but it was deemed not in really a great spot. And so we need land, I guess, is part of it. And identifying a spot that not only would be great for a dog park, but maybe that doesn't take away another potential competing priority in town. If we put a dog park in that open spaces or something else out there that, equally should be built. So I think there's a lot of needs in the outdoor recreation area on the wish list that we've had on our 5-year and 10-year plans for a long time, but it comes, obviously a lot of it comes down to funding. And then in this case with the dog park, with identifying the right place. But we haven't, and that's the big thing that happened during COVID, wasn't it, too? People that not only had dogs, but the amount of people that adopted dogs and purchased dogs that really spiked up. So I would only anticipate that need getting larger here. So.
Yeah, I do want to echo just what Jay was saying about the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, because we do get, I hear from mountain bikers, right, where we really only expressly permit mountain biking on one of our properties because we really need to do an evaluation. So the dog park, the mountain, biking, pickleball, tennis courts, we need to really assess what the need is within the community and how to program it and where, and then how we're going to pay for that, what the priorities are.
Mr. Shuren?
I was just going to say, we all have our wish list, but I just want to add my name to those who wish very much to have a dog park in this town. And I no longer have a dog.
All right. This has been extraordinarily helpful. It's the beginning of a long-term dialogue, I believe, as we begin to emerge from COVID, and while we are trying to figure out how to cover the losses that we've incurred over this past year, and how do we make our recreation program meet the needs of all our townsfolk. So thank you very much, Jay and Jennifer, and I think it is time for us to move on to our next agenda item, which just disappeared from my computer. There we go. So let's move on here to the status of local authorities relative to mandating masks and face coverings. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I believe Attorney Deneen is here as well.
Yes, Kevin is with us tonight. So I think all members of the council recall that back in late summer, the governor, with support from the legislature, enacted Executive Order 13A, which gave municipal governments the authority, basically a local option, if you will, to adopt or impose a universal mask order. We discussed a few days later, I think it was August 9th at a council meeting thereabouts, what the town of Mansfield might do with that authority, whether or not to exercise it. And there was a lot of concern at that time about the return of UConn students from the summer, coming back for the fall semester and wanting to, basically get out in front of it and help hopefully nip a potential problem in the bud before it became a problem. Fast forward to more present times, and the authority the governor had is sunsetting that executive order. Will basically dissolve or expire, I should say, I believe on February 16th or on the 15th or after the 15th. So in any case, there's been a lot of effort and activity in recent days in the legislature, trying to figure out what to do, and much debate being had about the merits of allowing municipalities and school districts, I should add for that matter, to have the ability to make local decisions about masking in their respective communities. And so Kevin and I have been in regular communication about this. I know on Friday, the House of Representatives passed House Bill 5047, which again, in broad brush strokes here, would give municipalities, and Kevin, please jump in and correct me if I get any of this wrong, would give municipalities the ability to extend a mask mandate as far as April 15th. Doesn't necessarily have to go that far if they so chose, but that's sort of the outer limits of what a municipality could do. And then likewise, June 30th for a school district. So basically would allow a school district or the local board of education to adopt a mandate that would have that school district finish out the school year under a mandate. So And as I understand it, the Senate passed the House bill today without amendment. Kevin, is that correct?
Correct. There were 3 amendments. They were all defeated, so they passed in concurrence.
So basically, that bill is on the way to Governor Lamont for signature. But I'll turn it over to Kevin. Maybe there's some nuances here that I missed, Kevin, if you want to speak to any of that.
Sure. No, that summarized it well. It continued those provisions with regard to 13A for the local option through the 15th. The reports that are out there is the governor's intending to sign this tomorrow because his executive orders terminate at midnight tomorrow. So it was emergency certified, so it went right through the system very quickly as they passed these things. So I think Brian hit all the high points on that, at least as it applies to the municipalities.
And I guess one question of clarification, Kevin, one of the things you were going to look into, and not put you on the spot, but hopefully maybe you have an answer now. So hypothetically, if a town or a city was inclined to continue its existing mandate, a mandate that it imposed under the previous executive order, I'd speculated that you would still have to enact something new under the new authority. You couldn't just let the old one ride because the authority has changed. Is that accurate? Were you able to look into that?
Yeah, as is usual, the language isn't particularly clear in the bill that was adopted. My feeling that the safer manner would be to adopt that if it's that policy wish to adopt a mask mandate, to do so pursuant to the authority in the bill. Subsection C says that you can continue to rely on the previously issued executive orders that were extended, but it's not really clear that whether or not you need to readdress. So I think the safest way, if that's the policy choice that people want to make, that adopt basically the same resolution that you did earlier in the year, just substituting adopted House Bill 4057 or whatever the number was there.
Thanks, Kevin. Mayor, looks like Deputy Mayor Shaken has a comment.
Yes, Mr. Shaken.
I have a process question related to that. So we've over the course of the pandemic done a number of similar things to what's in the packet, and my recollection during that period of time was that while the council has provided its guidance and feedback, and at times done that by a vote, that the town manager is the entity in the charter that's authorized to make emergency rules. And so the town manager has the authority, absent any action from the council, if there's a state of emergency, to issue things like a mask mandate. I'm not suggesting we wouldn't vote on anything tonight. I'm simply saying that our packet has some highlighted text and some X's, since the governor hasn't signed this bill yet. And so if we were to give Ryan guidance, even in the form of a motion, would we need legally, Kevin, to adopt a formal resolution, or could Ryan issue that resolution with his executive authority tomorrow, or whatever the bill is actually signed, and we can put some dates and times in the resolution?
Yes, ultimately it was through the chief executive officer of the municipality. So in this case, it would be Ryan. But what I've seen generally across the state is people looking for guidance from the legislative body, the legislative electors, as to where they're going to go on that. So, but it is ultimately up to the CEO of each of the towns.
Well, then I'm happy to yield to other questions, but I think I'm gonna, when the time comes, if there aren't any, or when they're through, I'm gonna make my own motion up so that we can sort of do that, given that we won't have dates. We don't know the name of this law yet. So I'm happy to yield to questions, but that is where I'm leaning towards making sense.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Coleman?
Yes, I'm new to the council. We're looking to grant the town manager executive powers in the matter of mask mandates. Is this a new practice?
No. The fact is that the governor's orders have given this power to the chief executive officer, who is the town manager in Mansfield. So what we have done is instruct him to do this. But that's been true of all of our motions.
How were these mask mandates imposed to begin with?
I beg your pardon?
How were the present mask mandates imposed? Were they imposed by the council or were they imposed by the town manager?
So I can speak to
Council
that.
instructed the town manager to exercise his authority to do this.
Okay, and that's what we're doing tonight. Is that correct?
That could be what we're doing tonight. I think that's what Mr. Shaken intends to propose.
I'd like to keep it within the power of the council. That's my opinion.
I don't think we have the power under the statute to do it. We do have the power to set the policy for him to administer.
So if I could perhaps jump in a little bit. So there's a statute on the books which deals with the 28-8A, which is specifically authorizes the chief executive officer of a municipality to do that in a health or emergency that we're under here. And the governor and the legislature adopted a concurrent resolution extending those. So those authorities, it's not a question of giving, the statute already gives that power solely to the executive, chief executive officer.
Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, thanks. I want to be clear. I'm not making any kind of suggestion that we cede any authority in any way except to be in compliance with the state statutes and the executive orders that we've had so far. That Ryan has rightly, in my opinion, not acted independently of the council in any of these ways, and John before him, when we issued orders closing municipal buildings and otherwise acted with, enacted the will of the council, but only that we as a council can't, unless we were to pass an ordinance, which I think we wouldn't have statutory authority to do, to set a law in Mansfield that forevermore we require masks or until we repeal the ordinance, that our authority is to who we grant chief executive officer authority, and in Mansfield in our charter, that's the town manager. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I think Ryan is 100% correct to not feel comfortable acting one way or another until he gets feedback from the council. And I am, whenever questions are over, I'm very much prepared to offer that feedback by way of a vote, not by way of just a general sense. But again, if Charlie has a question, I can wait.
I just want to remind everybody that often when we are asked to approve grants of various kinds, what we are doing is authorizing the town manager to sign the grant, so that this is not uncommon, since we are a legislative body and not the executive branch, to delegate, to approve the actions of the executive branch or to instruct the executive branch. But this may not necessarily come from the council itself. Mr. Osberger.
Although they haven't fully approved and come to a decision in Hartford, I know that some of the discussion had surrounded upon leaving the power up to the superintendent of schools. And is that what we want to do? I'm just throwing that out there because I'm going along with the rest of the discussion here. But certainly I think that it should be, if not let up to the town manager, certainly the legislative body and not the superintendent of schools.
I think there's two parallel tracks here. What the school district will do is sort of to be worked out by the Board of Education and the superintendent. And what the municipality would do would be worked out by its governing body and its executive officer.
So to simplify it, who would be in charge? I mean, does the Board of Ed have authority over you?
They would know they would have authority over the school system, which is a separate set of agencies governed by state law. So the laws that have been passed in the last couple of days gave the Board of Education and the school superintendent authority over schools, and it gives the town and the council and the town manager authority over municipal buildings, but not over schools. So it's possible that the school could say, we're going to get rid of the masks, and the town could say, we're going to impose the masks. But in fact, in this town, the school superintendents have asked for our opinion as well. Although I think given the letter that the superintendent of Mansfield Schools has drafted, they are inclined to continue a mask mandate in the school system.
So is that to imply that the schools are a separate legislative body?
They are. It's a separate state agency governed by the State Board of Education, as opposed to our authority, which comes from the state legislature, independently of the school boards. It's a long-standing, I mean, it's been true for hundreds of years. Mr. Coleman.
So let me just clarify this. Ben, Mr. Shaken is about ready to put this to a vote. We vote on it. We're voting to give him the authority, but we also have that power not to grant the authority.
Yes.
As if we were, voting on a grant, the same deal.
Well, we could ask him not to do it. I think he still has the. Kevin would probably have to answer this question, but I think he still has legal authority to do it.
Ultimately, the town manager has the authority. I believe what the resolution is asking for council support or guidance on that, but ultimately it's up to the town manager under the statute.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaken.
All right, I'm going to make the motion. I'm going to put it in the chat so that Sarah Ann can grab it. I'm going to move effective today to direct town manager to enact an indoor mask mandate as summarized in our packet upon the emergency authority renewed by House Bill 5047 and House Resolution 1 when they are signed by the governor.
Is it Ms. Berthold? Do you second? She's seconding. Okay. Discussion. Mr. Shaken.
So just in support of my motion, in the summer, the governor switched his executive order. You'll recall prior to the summer, there was a statewide indoor mask mandate. Then it became a statewide indoor mask mandate only for unvaccinated people. When the Delta variant came at the end of the summer, when UConn was going to bring its students back, the town enacted its municipal option to impose a mask mandate on all indoor public spaces. That mandate has run through. It is in effect today. And we, I think, have continued as a council to check in with our public health advisor in our public health district on his advice for when we ought to lift that mandate. He's on vacation tonight, so he's not here with us, which why we didn't get a COVID report. And so my proposition to the council is to wait to make a decision about any change until at least our next meeting, when Rob will be here and can update us on his guidance. You'll recall his most recent guidance is that an indoor mask mandate is advisable until Tolland County has been at below a substantial rate of transmission as defined by the Centers for Disease Control for 2 consecutive weeks. We are about 6 times the rate of substantial transmission in Tolland County right now. I checked today, we're 233 cases per 100,000 people. That's, I think, 50 cases per 100,000 is the rate at which Rob would like us to be for 2 weeks before we think about taking away masks. I will note that while Governor Lamont has changed his guidance and he's put things in the hands of local school districts beginning on March 7th, and there many political bodies have gone in a similar direction. The Center for Disease Control has not updated its guidance around when it is advisable to wear a mask indoors. And so because we have, I think, sort of consistently followed that advice, my recommendation would be, at least until we hear otherwise from Rob, that we continue to follow it. I hope in 2 weeks we can have a conversation with Rob about whether getting down to that 50 per 100,000 for a consistent period of time is ever going to be a realistic assumption, and whether there are whether we have reached a point when it's time to end non-pharmaceutical interventions for COVID, so things that aren't vaccines or treatment drugs. But I don't feel comfortable making that decision tonight without input from him. And so because the situation with the state's authorization for our mandate is changing, I think it's important we pass this resolution so that Ryan can, for at least the next 2 weeks, issue a renewed mandate. And then I should say, if Rob's advice doesn't change, I don't anticipate that I wouldn't recommend that we change what our practice has been. And I can speak with some confidence that I don't think either of the boards of education are feeling comfortable, given the vaccination rates within their schools, doing the same come March 7th. I know some municipalities will make different decisions, but I don't foresee a different decision coming out of the boards in Mansfield. And my final preference as an individual counselor would be that whatever we do in as much agreement with the two boards of education as we can, although as we just discussed, they're totally able to operate completely independently from any decision that we make. So I hope I'll have your support in this and that we can have a longer and more detailed conversation when we've got Rob in person on the 28th and he can give us his public health advice.
Yeah, at this day, there are only 4 or 5 towns that are out of the red zone, and they're all in the western part of the state. Mr. Osberger.
Are we putting the cart before the horse here, acting before the Connecticut legislature if it comes to a decision? Should we table this until they make a decision?
I think they've already made it.
Went to the Senate, but it hasn't gone and signed by the governor.
I think the governor has said publicly he intends to sign the bill.
Oh,
it's his bill. It's his bill.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that, since nothing's been etched in stone yet, are we putting the cart before the horse?
Well, if he signs his bill tomorrow, do you want to have a special meeting to put this through, or do we just do it tonight in anticipation? Somebody else had their hand up, and I just talked over Mr. Shaken.
To answer Charlie's question through you, Mayor, that's why I changed the motion from what's in the packet. Instead of passing a resolution without a date in it that you will find on drafted for you on page 181, I'm instead asking the council to authorize Ryan to essentially issue that resolution once we have details. If the governor vetoes the bill, then we will not have authority come Wednesday to impose a local mask mandate. And Ryan will not have the authority to do so either because the executive orders will have expired.
Anybody else? Mr. Coleman.
I support Mr. Shaken's motion in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are we ready to vote? Ms. Chang, would you call the roll?
Yes, Osberger,
I'm sorry, Charlie, you're muted.
Yes.
Berthelot,
Yes.
Bruder,
Yes.
Coleman,
Yes.
Fertoni,
Yes.
Kotchenberger,
Yes.
Moran,
Yes.
Shuren,
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a unanimous vote in favor of the resolution. My own feeling is that if people have said to me, I'm glad to shop in Mansfield. I come to Mansfield to shop because almost everybody is masked and they aren't in the towns I come from. So I think this is good for our local businesses as well as good for our children and school systems. So with that, then let's move on to the Human Services Advisory Committee charge. Ms. Berthel, I believe this came out of Committee on Committees.
Yes, Mayor, it did, though we didn't have a quorum, so when I make the motion, I'll need a second.
Okay.
The way it's written here, it looks as if there's that I'm supposed to read the entire document. I'm wondering if that's actually necessary or if I could simply ask to adopt the proposal as written here.
Does anybody object to waiving the reading? Go ahead.
You are also kind and I appreciate it. I move effective February 14, 2022 to adopt the proposed new Human Services Advisory Committee charge.
Mr. Osberger.
As I just barely missed that meeting, I will second it.
Thank you. I admit that I could have put this on the consent agenda, or at least that was offered to me as an opportunity. But I did want to make sure that everybody saw these changes. I think they're significant in the sense that I know that everybody on the council really believes that this particular committee is important, and that we want this committee to feel empowered to push the people who do human services for the town as staff, and us to be mindful of the needs of the community, and that this committee is empowered to advocate for those folks. And one of the changes you'll see in the charge is that they'll be giving us an annual report on the status of human services work and what possible changes should be made. So I hope you'll all support these changes. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? Are we ready to vote? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain? Is there anybody who wishes to vote in the negative? Then I rule that we have a unanimous vote support of the committee charge. Thank you. The next item is a proposal from Mr. Aylesworth for us to take a look at the objectives that go into the budget book for the town council. There isn't a vote on this. It's just he wants to bring it to our attention. So, Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, every year, along with all the municipal departments, there is a narrative for legislative. So basically, the town council's narrative, and as the mayor just alluded to, following the format for all the departments, there sort of starts off with kind of roles, responsibilities. A mission statement might be included if a department has a specific approved mission statement. A section on current fiscal year, in this case, fiscal year 21-22 accomplishments. Again, we're developing this halfway through the year, so you're kind of in a situation where you have to write it anticipating where you're going to end up at the end of the year. So it leaves for some awkward moments where you're talking about something in present tense that you haven't done yet, but you're anticipating you're going to get there. So there's a little bit of that goes on. But really the bulk of it is goals and objectives for the upcoming budget year, which is, of course, what the budget book focuses on. So FY 22-23 in this case. And I don't believe, I could be wrong, I don't know for sure. My understanding is that these narratives have pretty routinely been prepared by the town manager's office without any real vetting, approval, feedback really from the council. And I guess I just thought, since it is ultimately your story, the council's story, that while I'd like to think that I'm relatively on the ball in terms of what the council's priorities are. Wanted to put this in front of you since it'd be a little awkward if you guys were reading after the fact what your goals and objectives were and you disagreed with any of it. So, so whether you want to, you have any immediate feedback you want to offer now, you can certainly follow up with me outside the meeting. But as the mayor said, not looking for a vote or anything, just wanting to make sure I make the formal request for feedback because this is ultimately your narrative.
I will say that I am always amazed by how much work we have done or how many subjects we've covered when I read these things. It's sort of reassuring in a way. And you'll notice that they are mostly tied to the Mansfield Tomorrow goals and responsibilities of the town council. So my question here is, does anybody have any comment on these, on this proposed statement? And I do also want to remind you that as important as it is, I have a feeling that this is one of the details of the budget book that very few people actually read.
My understanding was that every resident in town read the budget book cover to cover. At least that's what I was told.
Oh, yes, and we often get feedback on this part of it.
They started reading in the schools, of course, starting with K on.
Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks, Mayor. I think it's great that we're going through this exercise. I'm reading the housing piece and saying, yes, that's right. That's absolutely great. Particularly liking the language about creating a sense of space, a place that attracts young families to Mansfield. I know that Human Services doesn't really have anything equally as aspirational, and I hope that we can find some language there that, because that's such a key piece of success for families and individuals in our town.
Thank you for that. I'll work with it.
All right. Any further comment on this? Then I think you can assume, Mr. Aylesworth, that we're all happy with it.
Thank you.
My tablet, which has the agenda on it, just died. So I think we have reached the end of our regular agenda. And what we're up to now is reports of committees. So Finance, Mr. Katzenberger.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a Finance Committee meeting immediately prior to this town council meeting. We went through and the financial statements and recommended that the council approve them as is, and they were on the consent agenda today. There were certainly nothing of alarm. There was some good news in the sense some of the funds were higher than we thought. The one thing we did discuss, it's some length, was the fact that the health fund, while millions of dollars within the discretionary surplus are needed, there was a 29%, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact amount, percent increase in claims over the last 6 months. And we believe likely explainable by the number of people who deferred medical procedures, voluntary procedures, or non-emergency procedures, who deferred them and then went on to have those procedures in the last 6 months to a year. I think that would be consistent with results found elsewhere in Connecticut as well as elsewhere. But even with that, there is still no danger to coming anywhere near close to the minimum requirement of 125% of the estimated claim costs for the future. And then the second, the only other item is that the town was unable, along with many other towns, to meet the earlier deadline on the reviewing the audit of the earlier funds and U.S. funds, but we will have that in by the new deadline, which was created in large part because so many towns could not meet it, which is the end of February, or February 27th to be exact. Those are the two matters.
Any questions for Mr. Kotchenberger? All right. Committee on Committees.
Thanks, Mayor. So if anybody ever wants to feel good about our town, take the moment to sit in on a Committee on Committees meeting. The amount of wonderful people who are stepping up is just terrific. And just recently, because Sarah DeFries, I'm not mispronouncing her name, I'm afraid.
Right.
Yes, did a shout out looking for folks, pointing out where we needed new members on our committee. So we've had a whole host of new people who I've never met before stepping up to be members on committees. We have so many people. We're going to have a special meeting that Sarah Ann is setting up so that we can move these along and get people appointed.
Great. Mansfield is really amazing. We have a very high percentage of volunteers working for town government. It's close to 300 people. Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, I attended the Committee on Committee. There was not a quorum. Maybe somebody can help me out with this. When there's no quorum, what business cannot be conducted?
You can't do any business. You can have conversations, but you can't pass any motions.
Okay, was anything put forth to the council today that was done during that meeting?
Yes, Ms. Berthelot presented the committee charge for human services, noting that she hadn't had a quorum and therefore the motion required a second.
Okay, so you're clarifying that you can bring business forth as long as the motion gets a second.
It doesn't imply that the committee has approved it. It is Ms. Berthelot's motion based on past activities of the committee, but this particular motion was not approved by the committee, so she is bringing it forward as an individual, which is why it required a second and full discussion. A committee motion does not require a second, but a motion made by an individual does.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome. Okay, personnel.
We have not met.
Okay. Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, I just want to mention that the Personnel Committee, Ryan has sent out an email. Our next meeting is actually, I think, on February 28th, right, Ron?
That's right. We're going to be discussing the motion that involves a charge to the Personnel Committee and perhaps a redesignation of the name.
So we're going to discuss the charge first and then bring it to the council?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I think I still can't get the agenda back up, but I believe the next thing is reports on committees and commissions, department reports. Is there any comment? Then the next thing would be new agenda items. We've put a number of things on the agenda for future discussion.
Madam Mayor, Councilor Coleman, I believe, signaled he wanted to talk when we got to communications about Mr. DeWolf's note.
Right. I'm trying to remember the agenda in my mind.
Yeah, future
position
agendas will
on
come
the
after
agenda.
that.
Okay. So now we'll look at the communications. Is there something that somebody wants to talk about with commissions? Or with communications? Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Ryan, for reminding the mayor on that.
I hadn't forgotten.
Mr. DeWolf had sent a letter to the town council. I'm sure everybody has read that letter in regards to the condition of Maple Street. I did do a site visit up there, and I feel Mr. DeWolf's concerns are very legitimate. I'm very concerned about that road. It's a main connector to the middle school and an elementary school. It's traveled by buses. It's already narrow. The road has hazards in it that might move a vehicle to the center of the lane to avoid a hazard on the curb or shoulder. I know, Madam Mayor, you sent Mr. DeWolf a email in regards to grant money that's going to repair that road 2 years down the road. I don't feel as though that road is in a condition that should be left the way it is at this particular moment. I would suggest, discussing it with the DPW on, any temporary repairs just to keep from any accidents occurring or anybody getting hurt on that road.
Mr. Carrington has joined us. I think maybe he can answer the question. Mr. Carrington, are you there? Welcome.
You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Oddly.
Great.
Now we
There
can.
you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Sorry. Old computer. Maple Road is, in my opinion, is pretty much the same condition it's been in for the 8 years I've been here. Yeah, there's some frost heaving and things, but if you drive the speed limit safe, part of the reason I took you on a tour is to show you there's plenty of other roads in the same condition. We have lots of problems with our roads. We got lucky on this one. We got a grant that's going to pay us $3 million to repave it, put in a bike path. If there's something that's real dangerous, pothole, of course, we would fix that. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend spending a lot of money on Maple Road when we're going to rebuild it all in 2 years. At least the portion up to about 500 feet past Max Felix. We did request for the second half of Maple Road through CROG, the lot SIP grant, and that we will not hear if we made the cut till sometime in April.
Mr. Carrington, have you spoken with CROG about that lot SIP grant recently?
Not recently, but I know my Tim Bayet, the project engineer, talks with the consultant that DOT has hired. Unfortunately, whenever you get free money from the state, it slows the process down. The sidewalk on Route 89 was something that was 2 years in the works before I got hired here, and we finally built it in 2019, I think. So it took 8 years to get that sidewalk in. This won't take that long because this one is the different funding, but that's the unfortunate part. But it is coming. I mean, unlike other roads that are just as bad, maybe not as well traveled as Maple Road, I can't tell them they're going to get paved in 2 years.
We all inherit problems. Just because we inherit them doesn't mean that we shouldn't address them in a timely manner.
Absolutely. I think we're addressing it in a timely manner. I mean, If there's something that's dangerous, we'll fix it, but I'm not going to like resurface the whole thing. I'm not going to spend $100,000 taxpayers' money to get it torn up 2 years later. But I will spend, in the thousands of dollars to fix areas.
Do you plan on spending maybe couple thousand dollars to use those figures to make temporary improvements there?
Yes.
Okay, that was my original question.
But he's not going to be satisfied with those temporary. He wants the road resurfaced. I want the road resurfaced. It just, it's going to take some time getting there.
I'm just looking to make the road safe, even if it's on a temporary basis.
Understood.
Cost.
We're on the same side, I think.
All right, thank you.
Carrington,
yeah.
When do you think the first shovel will go in, or the first scraping, or whatever the first thing is?
Not this construction season, but I'm hoping next construction season. So in 2023.
Okay. Let's hope you're still with us.
Oh, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
Good. Okay. Mr. Konchenberger.
A question for John as well. A resident asked me, and I thought we had such a list, but I couldn't find it. Is there a list, a public list of priorities on road paving, which roads are currently pending change, at the top of the list?
Yes, we have a 5-year plan. And
that lists the specific roads in order of priority?
Well, we have a study that lists every road in priority, but unfortunately, I think I've explained this before, they just rated the pavement condition. They didn't actually do like a boring and see what's underneath the surface. So a lot of roads that we thought we could just mill off the top and put pavement back on, we discovered, no, we have to grind up the entire road and reclaim it. So it's not an ideal thing, but we do have a list of what our plan is for the next 5 years as far as paving. And sometimes a road gets moved up. I'll talk about it in budget. I also have another idea of doing some of the neighborhood roads with a chip seal and something called a cape seal, which I think will satisfy a lot of people if the funding is approved. So we're talking about $500,000.
And the 5-year plan, is it on the Department of Public Works website?
I don't know if we have it available. I can make it available. I can put it on the website.
Great. Thanks, John.
We'll put a disclaimer on it that it's always subject to change and funding.
Absolutely. We need to.
May also be worth noting that at the last Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, they reviewed sort of a couple proposed amendments to their charge. And one of the things that John proposed, which I thought was pretty sensible, was having those, at least the upcoming year's projects about the actual 5-year plan go before the TAC, not for approval, not an up-down vote, but for feedback.
All right. Any further questions about petitions, requests, and communications? Hearing none, and we've dealt with future agendas. The next item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn. Mr. Ausberger moves, Mr. Coleman seconds.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, question, Mr. Ausberger?
I do. Two. When I see, looking at the budget review schedule, that it's listing that we're going to be meeting in council chambers, is that to say that we're going to start having in-person meetings?
My assumption was that they were listed that way so that they could reserve the room in the event that we resumed in-person meetings.
Okay, and is there some discussion on that or no?
I think that's something that we will be discussing at our next meeting when Mr. Miller is around.
Excellent. Okay, very good. This is kind of directed at Sam or perhaps Terry. The April 14th, Thursday, budget review, general fund and capital meeting also conflicts with our COC meeting. Something to think about.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll when we meet next, we'll deal with that.
Yep.
Anything else before we put a motion to adjourn on the table? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Coleman. Is there a second? Mr. Kotchenberger seconds. All right. Is there anybody who objects to adjourning? We will see you tomorrow night at 7. Good
See you
night.
tomorrow. Night.
Recording stopped.